Happening now, we'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world to the EdTech Situation Room. Tonight is May the 5th. It's Cinco de Mayo, 2021. I'm not going to just make up a date like I think I did last time I was hosting the show. And we are at episode 218. My name is Wesley Fryer, and I'm here in Oklahoma City, where we might survive the first week of May without a major tornado, which is always a good thing. And I'm joined as always, and I am the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at the Cassidy School here in Northwest Oklahoma City. Joined as always by Dr. Jason Neiffer, EdTech ruler and king of Montana and guru of all remote learning knowledge. How are you, Jason?
I am well, although guru of something, probably not entirely accurate, but thank you for saying that anyways. Again, I'm Jason Neiffer. I'm the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School, located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in lovely Missoula, Montana. And tonight, the weather is a pleasant, probably low 60s, maybe high 50s. We're going to probably have our first 80-degree day. Tomorrow is what it looks like. We're going to hit like 82 tomorrow, which is nice. We've only had a couple 70-degree days, so the weather is very welcome here in the first week of May. But I don't think we're here to talk about the weather. Wes, what is the EdTech Situation Room all about?
Well, every week, with almost no fail, we are gathered to talk about the past week's technology headlines through an educational lens. So if you want to head over to our website, edtechsr.com, you can click the link for links, and we've got a very long Google document which has show notes from the beginning of our show. I think that might have been back in 2015, 5 years ago. Is that right? I think so.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And so anyway, we're going to be bringing you some breaking news tonight. We have security news, tech correction, Apple, Google, social media, the miscellaneous category. And of course, we'll round it off with some geeks of the week. So Dr. Neiffer, I understand that you have been working hard with Gremlins in the Attic to get some special music effects for our breaking news.
I believe we have breaking news, Dr. Fryer.
All right. Well, isn't that exciting? Yes. So breaking news. Good job. I still like that.
Thank you.
Cha-chung. Okay. We'll revert. We're not a sponsored podcast, folks. So, you're getting what you're paying for here.
Yep.
All right. So let's start with some Facebook news. We have been waiting for the oversight board of Facebook to have a ruling on former President Donald Trump and his ban. Twitter had announced weeks ago that was going to be a lifetime ban, but Facebook has this oversight board, which has really not done that much. And so the first link I just dropped in was USA Today. This is 9:11 a.m. this morning, Eastern time. Facebook ban on Donald Trump upheld by Facebook oversight board, but decision opens the door to his possible return. We have a couple other links. I actually watched Fox News and then I watched CNN. One of the great things, ladies and gentlemen, about Google News, because when you click, full coverage or spectrum coverage or whatever, you get a lot of, oops, my dog is going to jump in my lap. You get a lot of different coverage. And so what I just heard was that the board said that they need to have, I think, clearer guidelines, but basically they have 6 months to make a final decision, throwing this back, I guess, at Mark Zuckerberg to make a decision. They did say things like they need to be assured that the former president will not continue to spread disinformation and falsehoods. And we're not a political show, folks. We're not going to be talking politics all night. But this is a huge impact technologically on what we've been calling the tech correction. And so on the Fox News clip, which maybe I will go ahead and drop those in, they're links that we have at the top of our show notes for tonight. This was it Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, was saying, this is going to galvanize Republicans. This is it. Republicans and Democrats are going to meet on this issue because we've got folks on both sides of the aisle calling for regulated tech. We're going to break up Facebook. They should not have this much power. This is going to be the tipping point for which we're going to regulate tech. And then, it's It definitely points to what we already know, and that is that the Facebook algorithm has tremendous power over what we can see and the ways that the ways we have culture created or destroyed, and just the way we live our lives. Like, it is an enormous impact. And there's some other articles in here too, but let me toss it to you, Dr. Neiffer. What are your thoughts on tonight's breaking news?
Well, I would say that a lot of coverage on this today, a lot of opinions, almost all of them critical of Facebook, and really it was a lose-lose for Facebook, right? The second that they put this out to their kind of Supreme Court of sorts to make the decision, and it would have made someone mad. I would guess that there would be equal amounts of outrage, perhaps from a different political persuasion, if now former President Trump had been allowed back onto Facebook, and obviously a lot of outrage that he wasn't. Although I would say that this court group, or this independent group that made this decision, also didn't really make the decision, right? They did green stamp the January 6th decision, or I guess post-January 6th decision, to boot then President Trump off of Facebook temporarily, and has kind of punted this back to the good folks at Facebook itself. But the bottom line is that lots of talk about rights and lots of talk about speech platforms, but the bottom line is that Facebook is a private business. I get that Facebook is very powerful, and I think it probably does justify regulation, but I think breaking it up as the headline, right, that we need to break up because they're too powerful, I'm not sure if that's even enough. Because if Facebook, and maybe also too much at the same time, but if Facebook is suddenly not the owner of WhatsApp and Instagram, and there are many other properties they snapped up in their buying sprees of late, then they're still Facebook, right? And I think until we as users think about what we're posting on Facebook, and also, to be honest, Facebook is a harbinger of a lot of negative conversations and talk from that side of the political persuasion that has nothing to do with President Trump. And I would imagine that those of that political persuasion would also argue the same is true of people that disagree with them. And so, as we mentioned dozens of times, even this year on the podcast, that the power to connect is a very powerful thing. It's not always used for good or for positive outcomes. And so we have to think about, what does that mean? Does that mean we should devolve the technology? Does that mean we should regulate the technology? What does that look like? If the government steps in and overregulate Facebook, that would be perhaps an impediment of speech, which would violate the First Amendment. Facebook can do it all it wants to, but there is risk in regulation from the standpoint of the First Amendment. So obviously the issues are quite complicated, but I would say that I don't know the right answer here, but I'm willing to also mention that I don't think the Facebook Supreme Court probably knows the right answers either.
Hello to Peggy George in our chat room, and she's sharing a link to Kara Swisher's article on the Facebook decision. I had not read that yet. I am going to drop a link into the Wikipedia article for Section 230, which is something we have discussed, as Jason said, multiple times on the show, and this whole idea of the tech correction and regulation. I'm going to say that in civics class next year, in 2021, 2022, we should be talking with students about Section 230. Section 230 is one of the things that they're talking about whether they need to amend or do away with. It extends what's called the Good Samaritan protection of civil liability. It basically says that you don't treat a Facebook or a YouTube or a blog service as the publisher or speaker of information, and it permits a wide range of voices to be on. Yes, it also permits extremist voices, and there can be voices that they may violate community standards and and decency and laws and things like that in different countries. But these are big issues, and these have big impacts on democratic governance. We don't have these things figured out. It is really messy. There's not a technology solution where artificial intelligence is suddenly going to arrive on the scene and it's going to save us. So a couple related articles that I'll share. And really, the breaking news with the tech correction news, with the social media news, are all kind of blended together. There's a really nice piece in the New Yorker from May 2nd called Facebook and the Normalization of Deviance. And this article is breaking down a lot of history about what Facebook has not done, the apologies that we've seen in the past, the ways in which Facebook has been weaponized by different groups and different individuals, how they've responded to data breaches or not responded to them. It just, and then it references an April 13th report by the Markup, which is a nonprofit, that is indicating, Facebook's ad business monetizes and reinforces political polarization in the United States. It points to the idea that Facebook has played a pivotal role in polarizing the nation and fueling many of the difficulties that we have today finding compromise, which, by the way, is an essential part of democratic government. If you can't have compromise, you really can't govern. And this is a huge problem. So that is a good article. And then there's one more that could actually go under the breaking news. Twitter begins to show prompts before people send mean replies. This is NBC News today on May the 5th. Twitter, prior to the election, had started to do something where if you didn't read the article, like even click the link, which they assume, you got to click the link to read the article. They were going to say, hey, do you want to read this first? And so now AI is actually detecting if you're perhaps having a mean tone to what you're tweeting. But it's going to not just stop you. It's going to pop up and say, hey, do you want to rethink that? Anyway, interesting. The companies are trying to deal with this, but the root issues here, and it's just so, of course, the Trump presidency was sort of the Twitter presidency. I mean, there were many decisions. It was just his megaphone of how he communicated, not only with the world, but sometimes with his own staff, firing people, and just, it was elevated to a point that we had never seen, social media lifted. So, has your thinking, Jason, about the tech correction and how this all might be resolved or where it goes, do you think it has shifted or changed much? Let's just say since the election and since, the start of the year.
Well, I think the tech correction, in my mind, started in the 2016 election, right? And then 2017 and 18 with all of the revelations about Cambridge Analytica and the hacks. And I have two related articles I'll shift to in a second that also speak to these topics in a lot of ways. But I think that started really in the 2016 election, and I don't, it's easy to point fingers at Trump because he was such a heavy user of Twitter, but the reality is that the hacking of the 2016 election, which benefited and hurt both sides of the election, that there were groups internationally that were really just trying to wreak havoc in the United States electoral system, whether there was any preference for one candidate or the other or not. And certainly the Mueller report, which talks about a lot of this in some detail, talks about influences of international actors that were trying to influence the election. That particular report tended to bend a little more towards those that were trying to bend the election in favor of former President Trump. But the bottom line is that I think this started well before Donald Trump became president, and I think it's going to continue a while longer, even though Trump himself is trying to stay relevant on social media, despite the fact that he doesn't have access to any platforms. And an example of that tonight comes from The Verge. This was yesterday's edition of The Verge. Donald Trump has launched his social media platform. It's not really a platform, and in fact, it probably is best described as a blog. But the website, which is I think donaldjtrump.com/desk, I think I would need to look a little bit.
That's correct. That is the link. Yes.
Right. And so, and they're not even, they're tweet like statements he sends out, or this week has sent out about 5 or 6 a day. They're obviously, in the way he used to use Twitter, for example, he spent a lot of time on Representative Cheney from Wyoming today, who he is a very public beef with at this point. The bottom line, though, is that it was wise in that there are share to Twitter, share to Facebook links on every one of those statements. So in effect, he's using members of his fan base to be able to push his attitude out over Twitter. So it's kind of a clever way of kind of getting around that ban. But the bottom line is that there's a correction that's going to happen. I just 5 years after we started talking about it, I still don't know what it's going to be. I also don't really understand what we can, what positive steps we can take from a regulation standpoint. I would still go back to that. Probably the most important thing we can do as educators is continue to educate our students, certainly about civics. I think that's a really important piece of this, but also understanding the power of social media and treating it like it's an enormously powerful tool that has shocking side effects that we need to be extremely aware of as its users.
So I'll just kind of add a little side note of commentary here, and I'd be happy if anybody has input or thoughts on this. So this summer, I'm going to have a chance to participate for the 3rd time in the week-long Institute on Digital Literacy. And it was remote last year. It's going to be remote this year, and I'll have a chance to be faculty this year. Prior to last year's Institute, which is a week-long, wonderful time of professional development, projects, working with other educators. I work with Brian Turnbaugh, who is a secondary teacher up in the Chicago area, and we worked on a project called Conspiracies and Culture Wars, which has led to a focus on the moon landing, and now it's about a 7-lesson unit that I've been doing with my 6th graders on web literacy, discerning who it is that you believe online, applying the SIF framework, learning about lateral reading. Some good stuff. It's actually pretty challenging for 6th graders. But my out loud thought is I'm meeting with Brian tomorrow night, and then actually the team is having a meeting as well. And I need to think about kind of where that project goes. And I think we need to write a book about this. There's a lot that we need to be educated about ourselves when it comes to what's happening societally, with technology, with elections. But there are important skills that we need to help students acquire, and we also need to navigate the polarized climate that we're in. None of us need to be fired. But at the same time, it's important to talk about current events, and these kinds of issues are really essential to civics and to governance in the 21st century. So perhaps there's room for, some kind of one-day summit or webinar. I sense that we're still going to be largely online this summer for professional development. I've been toying myself with the idea of doing some face-to-face, and anyway, it's a great time to be doing webinars and online stuff, and maybe after this will be more, in person.
Sure.
But I think, the conversations that Jason and I get to have, each week are very clarifying for me. It's always a challenge, to be reading articles and considering different perspectives and trying to connect dots. And I think that's an important thing to be sharing with students too, to apply the educational lens to this, is we need their help to help solve this, right? To help figure this out, because you got to be careful when you say it's never been this bad, or we've never had these challenges. And look, we're not in World War II. And I mean, there's been much more horrible and terrible conditions to be in than many of us are living in today in 2021. However, it is unprecedented to have the globe connected as the way it is today, to be able to have current events, live video streams, messages, shared at the speed of light, and also affected by bots and by a wide range of actors who have, armies of both people and programs that have been written to, try and influence people's minds. And it's just it's a wild west. And we really need to enlist students to help us grapple with these issues and understand the complexities, because it is complicated. And then hopefully to find a way forward so that we can, continue to have representative government, to make representative government even better. I was listening to a Noam Chomsky podcast this week, and I was like, whoo. Anyway, did a bunch of reading of him when I was in college. We need kids to help us, and we need to be looking at how civics education specifically, I think, grapples with many of these issues and tackles them head on, and challenges students to help be part of the solution.
Absolutely. And I'm going to kind of shift us a little bit here. I do want to note something. The one funny thing about former President Trump's kind of wannabe social network here, I don't think the hard button actually does anything. I think you just press it, and it just seems to click, but it doesn't do anything. So I think that's kind of interesting. I don't want to shift for a moment. I don't obviously want to spend the entire show talking about social media, because obviously huge impact on education, but there's a lot of other cool stuff to talk about. But I do want to talk for just a bit about something really interesting that's going on, also impacting Facebook. And that is that Facebook, you can turn off you can turn off tracking, user tracking on Facebook. We talked about that in previous episodes, that iOS 14.5 gives users the ultimate choice to turn off app tracking. And there's a couple of interesting articles about this. The first one is from 9to5Mac on May 2nd that talks about Facebook's campaign to tell you to not do that. And I will say it wasn't my intent to turn off app tracking in iOS, and it turns out that I was encouraged to do so by an article that said it was easy as clicking one button, so I did do that. I've not seen the ad that the 9to5Mac article is talking about, but Facebook essentially says, if you want to keep Facebook free of charge, the only way to do that is to have us deliver you personalized ads. And then there is an extended commentary also from 9to5Mac, and that was today, I think, from Ben Lovejoy, talking about how he probably wasn't the kind of guy that would turn off ad tracking because he prefers personalized ads, as do I. I would say that in general, I think personalized ads are better than non-personalized ads. But he said that the kind of vague threats by Facebook to start charging for the app are too much for him, and that it's encouraged him to really maybe think about the tracking over applications. I have to say, I think that the only way for Facebook to survive in this marketplace, if they truly believe they can't make a profit without tracking you, is to start charging for the service. And I guess I can't say I'd be much more than 10, 15, 20 bucks a year good for paying for Facebook, but I'd probably pay for Facebook if it meant that the advertising went away, and the tracking and the creepiness that comes with kind of 2021 Facebook. If that would go away, I'd be okay with paying for that service. And in fact, we're probably going to have to start thinking about ways we can pay for services directly, because the tracking train is probably not over, but it's going to be severely minimized. And Apple's really throwing a gauntlet down here by creating a software means for us to take more control over our data.
Couple of comments real quick. I had turned on I turned on allow apps to request to track, but I've never gotten a request to track. I deleted the Facebook app just for my phone, not my account, reinstalled it, nothing. Nada. There's no request to do anything. Facebook is just operating as it has. So is that because I clicked previously to allow it? I don't know. I have seen no difference myself with iOS 14, and I know, and Peggy said she's opted out as well. I think we had a survey last week that was saying like 66% or 2/3 of iOS users are choosing to turn that off. But it's weird, and so I don't know. I could guess I could turn it off, but it's weird that nothing pops up on my screen asking me anything. So if anybody knows I don't know. I guess I should Google that a little bit more and do a little bit more research. And then I would kind of push back on that a little bit, Jason. I think that, I mean, I don't know, I'm influenced by This Week in Tech and their conversation recently. Marketing and advertising was a huge business before we had the level of intrusive tracking that we have now. And so, Facebook has a lot of eyeballs. And yes, there are a lot of folks who love being able to drill down and target the ads in the way that they can, because so much data is not just harvested, by the way, by Facebook, but we go to the CVS or Walgreens pharmacy and we buy something and they say, oh, and would you like to have 3 cents off so we can add to the opaque cloud of data that, we're not showing you, but is being collected, on your behalf or being collected, on you. It's more than just Facebook in terms of this whole ecosystem. And I think advertising is a really important part of capitalism, and I don't think either capitalism or marketing is going away. But I definitely think we're hearing louder drums beat about regulating Facebook, and honestly, I hope that they are. I mean, but it's dangerous, right? Because we're going to have legislators that are going to be debating and passing laws who might not be understanding how the internet actually works. And,
right.
That's scary. It is. But I think that Facebook has had epic fails too many times. I think the unintended consequences have been devastating in many places. Ask the Rohingya minority in Myanmar and Burma. There's a lot of different examples of how this has been incredibly destructive, and there's no way Facebook can, has demonstrated a capacity to self-regulate successfully. But that said, I don't expect it to be pretty, and I don't expect that it's going to be elegant and effective in the ways that we hope it will be. It's going to be messy, but I think about the Wild West, right? Maybe that's not a great analogy, but it took quite a while for law and order and for different norms to be established, because things were just chaotic. And anyway, it was a different time, but it still feels that way. And I think that we're going to continue to see a variety of different entities, both governmental and non-governmental, try to influence this. And, what Facebook really needs is strong leadership and a vision for the future. And I don't know if Zuckerberg has the capacity to do that. He has the capacity to apologize a lot. And that's kind of the image that I have of him now with testifying. But they need to change that, because that's a very poor, image of you to have of the leader of this company. But I don't know if Zuckerberg has the vision and what it will take to lead his company into the future. I think Tim Cook does, and I agree with you, Jason. I'm really glad to see Apple taking this stand, and it poses a substantial challenge. Is it an existential threat to Facebook? I don't think so, because I think there's still a lot of room for Facebook to monetize, but who knows?
I'm going to throw one other thing out just because it was so interesting and it caught my eye. But Signal is a really great messaging app that allows for end-to-end encryption. In fact, I'm on Signal now, and I've been using it to text some friends back and forth. I will tell you that my Signal my Signal messages are not very interesting and aren't anything that really needs end-to-end encryption. But the point is that, just because it's not uninteresting doesn't mean it doesn't deserve protection from prying eyes, right? But Signal did something very interesting and released this information yesterday. It was originally, I read the article originally in Gizmodo, and then they send you to the Signal blog. But basically, they utilized existing Facebook tools for targeted advertising that allows you to insert dynamic data into the ad. And the ads they came up with were totally creepy and kind of concerning. So I want to read you one of the ads. This was an ad that I believe was going to go out over Instagram. The ad said, "You're getting this ad because you're a blank and you're blank. This ad used your location to see you're in blank. You're into blank and thinking about blank." And so the kind of things that they ended up serving up or that they proposed serving up, utilizing the tools available to advertisers in the Facebook platform, You got this ad because you're a K-pop loving chemical engineer. This ad used your location to see you're in Berlin. You have a new baby. You just moved, and you're really feeling those pregnancy exercises lately. You got this ad because you're a GP with a master's in art history, also divorced. This ad used your location to see you're in London. Your online activity shows that you've been getting into boxing, and you're probably getting there on your new motorcycle. And this one, you got this ad because you're a newlywed Pilates instructor and you're cartoon crazy. This ad utilized your location to see you're in La Jolla. You're into parenting blogs and thinking about LGBTQ adoption. And, I just don't think every time, that you see an ad that is for something you've been shopping for already, that's probably the minimum it understands about you, in that the algorithm and the advertising tools available to target ads to you are extremely pointed.
That is a magnificent article and effort at transparency. It reminds me of Manoush Samarodi. What was the name of their podcast that we like so much?
Note to Self.
Note to Self. And there were some really excellent episodes that she did, and there were tools. I think there were Firefox add-ons that at one time, and these may have been broken with Facebook API changes, you could gain some insight into this, again, opaque vast cloud of data and information that has been collected by not only Facebook, by these third-party companies, and forms this whole, ecosystem of really pretty surreptitious surveillance that undergirds surveillance capitalism, which is the cornerstone of several different large companies, many companies out there. So I think that's a beautiful article. And I love how that has visibility that's jarring, because, that information is being collected. And I've had a somewhat similar experience a few years ago when I ran my own Facebook ads for some workshops that I was doing. And I was like, really? And it is, well, I mean, you can commit crimes, right? You could choose, you can choose to target in terms of like housing and stuff like that. And this is something that's been criticized, and I think people have done that where there are equal housing laws and things that are trying to stop, for instance, racist advertising or marketing. And anyway, Facebook's tools are just so vast. And that just really was kind of an eye-opener in that same sort of way that article is. You're like, wow, they have that kind of data. And then they can actually, iterate on that. And just imagine, Jason, what that would mean if it was in the hands of different political, party employees. What could go wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. What could go wrong? So interesting ad. By the way, Facebook apparently banned them from running ads because they didn't make it past their vetting. But there are different statements about what actually happened there. So enough about social media. It's time to move on. Wes, where shall we go to next?
Well, why don't we just head down right to the miscellaneous category, because I've got a few different things that we can jump into. Let's start with the New York Times yesterday on May 4th. As cars go electric, China builds a big lead in factories. Wow, this is an incredible article. It is amazing to me. I don't know if you ever saw, Jason, that special on whatever happened to the electric car, but there was this time in the not so distant past where, major auto manufacturers just flat out did not want to see electric cars succeed. And I don't know, because it's been a while since I've seen it, if it was General Motors or Ford or who it was, that had produced this car. But then after it was over, like, they were destroyed. And so anyway, this is a phenomenal article. And what it says to me, in addition to look out, but hey, electric cars are coming way faster than you probably realized. It's also the ascendancy of China and the incredible investments that, people and groups and hedge funds and all this are making in the electric car economy. And I have had an opportunity this last weekend Shelley and I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas, which, by the way, if you want to study a town with some interesting history, check out Hot Springs. If you're a Star Wars fan, you'll recognize the name of Mos Eisley. It was a hive of scum and villainy. And that was actually a pretty good apt description of what Hot Springs was, in Prohibition days and like before the 60s. Anyway, all of that to say that I totally lost my train of thought. What was I trying to say? Something about guys, I'm telling you, you turn okay, thank you. You turn 50, the brain neural loss is real. With my brother-in-law is what I was trying to say, because we spent the weekend together. We were talking about, he's from Texas. They live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. They almost came up here because of power outages. And, Texas really showed us in that recent, storm how fragile the grid is and how it's really not ready for substantial, shocks to the system. And in his opinion, we're really not ready yet in terms of our grid for the demands that electrical power is going to place on us. However, Elon Musk is riding to our rescue with the Powerwall, and eventually with solar panels that we'll be able to put on our roofs and, all kinds of things. But this is a fantastic article, and it was a real eye-opener. So, Jason, are you considering, or would you consider, an electric car? And let's just spin it to the educational lens. What impact how would you see a conversation about electric cars fitting into classroom conversations? Is there a space for that?
Well, I mean, it is a transformation revolution, right? And it, obviously automobiles themselves, and I always see this from an historical standpoint, right? I was a history teacher in the classroom. I taught about the transportation revolution with initially trains in the United States and then ultimately motor vehicles. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a historical conversation there, and not everyone agrees that global warming, the global warming exists, and that fossil fuels are a cause of that. Most scientists do, but I think there is a real room to talk about what is it that we should be doing to deal with that. And I think electric cars, electric vehicles, in my humble opinion, are a big part of that. Although one of the things to remember about electric vehicles, you also have to be concerned about where your electricity is produced. And there are places, and it's true of Montana, we have a lot more renewable energy here than we did 20 years ago, but a lot of Montana's electricity is generated by coal. So, it's not quite as simple as it looks, that just convert to electric cars and, the pollution that comes from transportation goes away. But very much interesting topic. And I do think innovation is an extremely important component of the transportation revolution.
Excellent. Okay, one more. We'll just take I've got a couple here, but we haven't talked about CRISPR in a while. This is an Engadget article that was on May 1st. Harvard scientists create gene editing tool that could rival CRISPR. As you may recall, we had a Nobel Prize awarded in chemistry to both a female French and a female U.S. Scientist, I think biochemists. And it was about CRISPR, this technology that allows for gene editing and for parts of a genome to be snipped out and then enzymes to repair. What these Harvard gene editors are saying they can do with their tool is something far more complex. And rather than just, taking out single things, they can do all of these edits simultaneously. So the potential for both, good and scary uses of this is, I'm sure, going to also come faster than we might expect. So, biotechnology, it's an industry of the future. It's a huge part of our collective and shared, literally, future. Because editing the genome of an organism is something that is that is potentially inheritable if that organism has offspring. And so I thought that was pretty interesting as well. The thoughts, or would you like to take us somewhere else, Dr. Neiffer?
But let's get into some maybe techie stuff. A very quick security article I want to share tonight because of the sheer magnitude of the story. PC Magazine reported, this was today, early this morning, actually, that Dell is reporting a massive security flaw that goes back to 2009 that impact hundreds of millions of PCs. And the reason why I mention this is I know we have some tech directors, tech coordinators that listen to the podcast. And if you haven't seen this yet, and you are, if you have any Dells in your system and you're utilizing Windows, it's a malformed driver that impacts desktops and laptops and tablets from Dell. And it's so serious that Dell is actually going to issue patches for Windows 7 and Windows 8.1, which are both no longer supported by Microsoft. And so what that tells you is that it's a very serious issue. Now, you can actually take a step directly. You don't need the driver update from Dell to be able to deal with. There's a single file you can delete. You have to dig a little bit into the Windows operating system to do that. But if you are in a position to do that, in fact, I'm going to be working on that inside. I'm the IT lead for my small department. Then I'm going to be doing that with all of our folks involved. The new patched drivers will be available for Windows 7 and 8.1 later this year. And I believe that we're a week away. May 10th is when Dell system management apps like the Dell Update and Dell Command Update will have the new driver available. So something to keep in mind.
Keep your firmware updated. It was not very long ago I was wrestling with a bunch of Dell all-in-one machines and, having to just spend much more time than I would like, getting things updated. So if you have the luxury to not have to worry about that, and you have self-updating Chrome technology, perhaps, or anyway, you got to keep it patched and you got to keep it safe, and that is a real challenge. It's a challenge on every platform. But this is also why we want to see operating systems evolve, and why, as schools, we need to be looking at platforms that are going to, help not only protect individuals but our organizations, and are going to hopefully be, easier to manage in secure ways. So.
Yep, absolutely. And then I also wanted to, let's move on to some Apple news. Interesting stuff going on in the Apple world this week. First, I found a really interesting article on Lifehacker, and to be frank, Lifehacker articles haven't really been great on tech as of late. That since the blog was bought out a couple years ago, when their holding company was sold off as part of their bankruptcy because of the Hulk. I think it was the Hulk Hogan trial, whatever it was. The doctor,
right.
I think. Yeah.
That's right.
It hasn't been nearly as useful to techies, but it does make a list on how to set up every individual new feature in that's really worth it in iOS 14.5. And it's things like how to automatically change your iPhone screen orientation for specific apps. That's pretty interesting. How to answer calls with your voice. How to set up Siri's new voices. In fact, I moved to a new Siri voice over the weekend, and so what I think is always funny about this is as true on Android that it is on iOS products, but there's always amazing new features when they release new versions, but very rarely is there ever like a guide to this. You have to kind of dig on the internet or stumble into the feature to find it out. So I thought that article was kind of useful. And then I want to talk about AirTags for a second. And I will note that I am now the owner of 4 shiny new Apple AirTags. And it was a Marcus Brownlee video that really sold me on this. He had a really good review of these a week ago. And so I ended up buying a 4-pack of them. And I want to give a quick review. The 9 to 5 Mac article I shared today has a pretty solid review. It's a very positive review, which I would expect on 9 to 5 Mac. But I want to talk about some quick impressions I have about this. The first one is that it is very Apple. It's a beautiful, simple device. It's really easy to change the battery. It's got a nice hard white plastic with a metal top. And it works just like the other trackers. So I'm a tile guy. I've got a lot of tiles. I'm probably going to move towards the Air AirTag, but as the primary platform. But I would say so far, everything that you see on the videos works great, easy to track things, super interesting. There are a couple things that I don't like about them. The first one is that I find it utterly ridiculous that Apple didn't include some kind of way to hang this on something. There's no hole in it. There's no holder. It's just this. And thus you have to buy something else that it sticks to, or that holds it, so you can, put it on your bag or do something with it.
How many adapters have you had to purchase yet, Jason, for your M processor Mac?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's,
this is the Apple way, sadly. I mean,
it is, right? And and this is the Tile, right? One of my Tile trackers, and this is, I mean, admittedly, this is the more rugged one. Excuse me,
the more Montana one.
The more Montana one, right? And there we go. And, it's got this nice keychain holder on it, so that you can put this. In fact, I took this one directly off my keys. Apple will sell you a beautiful leather one for $35, which is more than you pay for the Air Tracker itself, or the Air Tag itself. It's just ridiculous. And because international manufacturers haven't really got in on this yet, there aren't any third-party alternatives that are available right now. So I've ordered 2 of them. One is literally shipping from China. It's going to take 45 days to get here. And then another one's going to be released the 3rd week of May. That one is a little nicer looking because it actually adds something that kind of looks like my Tile, actually, kind of a rugged look background to it. I find that to be silly. And that's that. I mean, I don't know what Apple gets out of that, other than it does delight third-party supporters of Apple. And third-party manufacturers make a ton of stuff to support Apple. The other thing I would say is that I have not been able, speaking of the Marcus Brownlee video, which is excellent, an excellent review, I haven't been able to figure out how to get the feature yet that tells me, that shows me a little arrow and where something's located at. So when I try to find something, it'll tell me it's nearby, and it will show me a map of my house, my house on the map. I don't know how to actually get it to where it helps me locate it by the direction it's going into. So I got to figure that one out. And the fact that it's not obvious is kind of un-Apple-like, because usually those kinds of features, are kind of baked into the process. So I haven't played with it that much, other than I did finally get to go visit my parents for the first time since Thanksgiving 2019 this past weekend. It was a delightful weekend. I love my parents very much. They're good people. I've obviously been in close contact with them since all this pandemic mess started. It's great to see them, but I haven't really had a reason yet. In fact, I didn't get these until I got back from that trip. I don't lose much right now, just sitting around my home 24 hours a day. So that hasn't really been a deal, but interesting, nice hardware. We'll see what that looks like. Are you in the business of perhaps an AirTag or 2 in your life, sir?
Well, you're definitely, anytime Dr. Neiffer says, I'm into this, you got to watch out, because you could, easily find yourself in a room with 30 different screens. But I'll check it out. I do have some things that sometimes, keys are obviously one logical possibility. Yeah, but the Apple way is really a lot of adapters, and that's just unfortunately gotten worse. I have so many different adapters in my little blue bag that I keep in my backpack, and it's for headphones now, because I sometimes I need the 1/8-inch adapter, sometimes I need a Lightning adapter, sometimes I need the USB-C because I've got an iPad Pro and computer, and I don't have USB-A anymore, and HDMI and Ethernet, so. Yes, yeah. It is kind of crazy. But on the other hand, a lot of things are wireless. And when you are heavily invested in the Apple ecosystem, I do actually plug into a docking station and use an external mouse. I've just kind of started to love that. And I do that at school all the time. But I would not have to. We have Apple TVs. We can wirelessly connect. And so dongle, heck, is not a reality for everyone. But it is the Apple way, and I think they maintain probably a very synergistic relationship with third-party product developers. Peggy had mentioned that picture, the second one that's in that 9 to 5 article. It is a Belkin adapter that it is picturing that does show a loop, third party. So you gotta pony that up. But yeah, I'll consider it. It wasn't. I don't know, the privacy stuff on iOS 14.5 was definitely the stuff that I was most excited about. In the second article, though, that you just mentioned about how to set up every article, I think that's the Life Hacker article. They mentioned Apple Maps sharing your ETA, and I've used the app Glimpse for a long time. I've finally realized, because when you go on trips, you can text your family, and it shows where you are. It even shows how fast you're going. So, in days gone by, when my dad would be driving, I'd be like, "Dad, are you really supposed to be going that fast?" Of course, I'm sure it could say the same thing about me sometimes on the road. But anyway, I had set my permissions wrong, where it would only share my location when I was using the app. Well, that doesn't work for something like that, where you want to be continually, sharing your location data with somebody. And I finally, I think, realized that's what I had mistakenly done. And that's Apple enhancing both on the iPhone and iPad, as well as the computer, locking down permissions. And, you have more granular control over those kinds of things, but sometimes your apps can break. So glad to see that update, and I'll check it out. But, it's not something that's rocking my world. I will say, I think that we'll probably be looking at getting some additional Apple Watches for some members of our family. I didn't put this in here, but I don't know, this is just on the rumor, but like blood pressure monitoring and blood sugar. Yeah, I think maybe I even tweeted you or copied you on that one. I was like, really? That is phenomenal. And yay, Apple with privacy, right? Because who is going to want to have really either an Amazon or a Google device that would be sharing that kind of confidential information? I mean, you just have to have a lot of confidence in the company to secure and protect your privacy. So.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to point out one other article that if you're interested in the privacy stuff regarding AirTags, it's worth your time. It's too much to describe in the context of the show, but Samantha Murphy
Kelly.
Thank you, Samantha Murphy Kelly, an interesting name to pronounce, writes on CNN Business that she actually tracked her kid using an Apple AirTag, threw it, I think, at her kid's backpack to see how much she could track it. And there's some interesting caveats there. I mentioned 2 weeks ago when we talked about the release of AirTags that I thought that Apple had added some very novel privacy pieces to be able to make sure that people aren't, throwing AirTags in the back of people's trunks and then utilizing that as some kind of search mechanism. And it seems like that some of those technologies aren't really finely tuned yet, because she was able to stick an AirTag with her kiddo, and track, like, for example, where her kiddo and a babysitter were located at. And Apple has commented that the software will evolve over time. It's also important to note that AirTags don't work in devices that either not updated to iOS 14.5 yet, or don't qualify to update to iOS 14.5, which includes a whole range of devices that are still in service. And so that's something to understand as well. But again, really interesting stuff, and I very much like the technology so far.
I dropped an Apple article I'll pick up real quick here. I think you've done one on Epic as well. Mine is a Gizmodo article from May 3rd titled "The Epic versus Apple Hearing is Already a Disaster." And interestingly, it's really not to do with legal challenges. It has to do with the ineptitude of folks handling the Zoom or whatever video conference was going on. And if you'd like to read an article about a freaking nightmare that seems to be so preventable, there was a hot mic for people who were watching this or whatever, and all these inappropriate interjections. And this is formally Epic versus Apple. I would say Apple Computer, but they're just called Apple now. I mean, this is big time. And it's like, anyway, we hear about, trolls, and what was it called? Was it Zoom trolling? Or anyway, there was different nightmare things that happened at graduation ceremonies that some universities had, and other things where, people were on there, just disrupting and doing things that were not appropriate. And so anyway, I don't know how they need some IT help there, basically, I think, in the courtroom. So do you want to pick up your other Epic article?
Yeah, this one's really interesting because it has to do with Epic versus Apple, but it also has to do with something that I've actually noticed as now that I'm an Apple mobile user again. A senior Google engineer has released I believe it was a blog post talking about something that it really does end up undermining one of Apple's critical arguments against Epic. And their argument is that if you don't want to be in the App Store, one of the options you can do is to create a web-based app, right? And we've talked in the past about PWAs or progressive web apps, which install on your phone like an app. I think those work on iOS as well, but they're definitely a component of the Android operating system. And you can install them on Windows PCs and Macs and Chromebooks. And they're definitely a step forward in web-based apps. But the argument he made was that the bottom line is that WebKit, which is the underlying technology that backs every single browser on iOS, and the reason why is because Apple won't let you create a browser technology that renders pages on its own. You have to use the Apple technology to do this. That's why Chrome sits on top of WebKit and not the Chromium browser, which is what they develop for Windows and Mac PCs for that matter, and all the platforms that Chrome is available on. But on iOS, so the mobile operating system that powers the iPad and the iPhone, you have to use WebKit. And what the Google engineer said is that you can't, or the WebKit is really dated and clunky when it comes to web-based apps. And you probably don't notice it on a regular basis with the regular web, but if you're trying to utilize a highly interactive space, which would be what you're looking for in regards to a web app, right? Something that functions as an app but delivered through a web browser. He says it's not really there on iOS devices, and I think that's some interesting food for thought in regards to Apple.
And he says in that article, too, it actually doesn't conform to agreed upon web standards,
Yep.
which is a pretty substantial charge.
Yep.
So hopefully our good friends at Apple are hard at work at this, but it points to, again, the need to be updating and the need to be continually renewing. The web continues to grow and change and be very dynamic. It's hard for us to keep up as human beings with our feeble, evolutionarily developed minds that are used to linear change and not exponential change. But hopefully they're updating that at some point. But I certainly haven't read about that, and that's kind of at a geek level that's beyond most of us as far as what the next level WebKit is going to be for Apple. But I would say that's got to be among the most important function of the phone. Isn't that weird to say about a phone? You'd think it was calling, but accessing the web and being able to do that, in a fast way, in a secure way, and all of that is pretty essential.
Well, and as Steve Jobs mentioned in the introduction of the iPhone, it's a revolutionary internet communicator, right? And a big part of that is the web.
That's right. Well, we're drawing near to the end of our time. Any other articles just leaping out at you, screaming, I want you to talk about me tonight, Dr. Neiffer? Oh, and Dr. Neiffer has dropped out. But he's back, ladies and gentlemen. Just when you thought the show was over, he's back.
right. The rogue click of the keyboard.
All right. Any last-minute articles before our Geeks of the Week that you'd like to make sure we talk about?
Nope. I think I've caught everything I want to talk about tonight.
All right. Sounds good. Well, my Geeks of the Week have to do with yesterday being the 4th is with you. May the 4th be with you. Lucasfilm, under control of Disney now, released a lovely video that as of this morning had about 250,000 views for one day. And it's entitled Celebrating May the 4th in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. So this is a wonderful montage of clips from lots of different Star Wars movies. And in showing this to my 5th and 6th graders, I was informed that the animated Clone Wars is a fantastic series that some of my kids were like, I love that. It's so great. So anyway, it's just about hope, and it's a wonderfully uplifting message about, how we win and how we overcome adversity. And then in the course of talking about that with my kids, my 5th graders, actually, I was reminded of the 1978 remix that my neighbors and I created in Lubbock, Texas, 6 months or 6 months, maybe it took that long. We kind of planned it all summer. My mother shot it on a Super 8 movie camera, if you remember those without audio. Anyway, it has 384 views as of today. So you can be viewer number 385. But yes, I was Luke Skywalker, and I had to be Obi-Wan Kenobi fighting Darth Vader. And my kids thought it was really funny that my first kiss, which was right before Princess Leia and I, leaped off of the fireplace mantle, not the mantle, but the fireplace, whatever. Anyway, swinging across the chasm. If you're a Star Wars fan, maybe you'll find it humorous. I was thankful that I was not taken down as a copyright because I do use John Williams music, but it's only clips, and hopefully that's fair use. I guess YouTube sees it that way. How about you, Dr. Neiffer?
Well, certainly they didn't take you down because John Williams recognizes your film greatness. So it was an acknowledgement of that. So that's delightful. I want to share a site that sometimes these articles end up in our list and sometimes they don't, but there's a really great website that is kind of community driven. It's called Hacker News. It's a service of the Y Combiner, which is a Silicon Valley based startup incubator and funding mechanism. And basically it is it's like if you used to do Slashdot back in the day. It's kind of like Reddit. There's a discussion component, but in any given day there's 20 to 30 new articles that are posted there. They are geek diddly, like it's really some really hardcore geek stuff there, hardcore science stuff, some programming language pieces. Today the top article that I read this morning was that there was a fork of Mozilla's Firefox Send product because it's open source and takes you literally to the GitHub page so that you can look at the code. Like it's hardcore geek, but if you are a geek, it's got really great stuff. And there's not a single time I go into it. And there's apps you can get on iOS and Android that are kind of feed into this so that you can see it via an app. It's really got good geeky stuff if you're looking for some good old fashioned fun on your phone.
Very good. Well, as I conclude the show, I will also, Dr. Neiffer, try to remember to say where can people find you, because anyway, I'll just blame age. But this has been the EdTech Situation Room, your weekly opportunity to hear Jason and I rant at times and pontificate on our thoughts about the week's technology news. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter at EdTechSR. You can check out all of our show notes on edtechsr.com/links. Of course, you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube. We are thrilled to have live viewers, and we want to say a thanks to Peggy George, as always, who is our faithful fan and assistant, actually, and oftentimes sharing links that are helpful. Jason, when you are not here on Wednesday night, where can people find you?
Best place to find me is Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach. And you, sir?
Lots of places, wesfryer.com/after, and I am sharing more things about food cooking on Cooking with Wes, but W Fryer on Twitter is the main place that I share. So until next time, we encourage you to stay savvy, stay safe, and don't forget to share the EdTech Situation Room, because we would love to expand the vast reach of this growing program. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.
Good night.